Hey Buckaroos, welcome back to another lesson in Musicom Academy. Today we're going to do something a little bit different. I was up visiting a friend of mine who I've worked with forever, and we got talking about radio, the usual, radio stuff. And as we're talking, I'm going, hey, let's stop talking and let's actually do this on film, because it would be really interesting for you, if you're a PD, to hear different perspectives of two general managers, one from the programming side and then one from the sales side. And with me here is Lori Russell. I've known Lori since 1991. So we both sort of started in Toronto at sort of the same time. And jump in and fill it in if I miss something here. I'm going to kind of probably abbreviate for time. So Lori started out as a national rep.
Yep.
National rep, and then ultimately ended up running the national rep place. And then she decided, okay, I'd like to be a sales manager, a GSM at a local station. So she became a local sales manager. She worked for me, and she was doing a stellar job, and there was a cluster there. So ultimately, just like in the national gig, all of a sudden she's the cluster sales manager, and she's overseeing all of the radio stations. And then I went upstairs and was doing the corporate national PD thing, and then she became a general manager of a few stations in a whole bunch of different kind of formats. Number one station format in Toronto, and if you're not aware of Toronto's size, Toronto in North America would be market number 3. New York, LA, Toronto. Then comes Chicago, and a lot of people that kind of don't know that. So big market, major and all that sort of stuff. Had a number 1 station, also had a station with a weak signal.
Number 12.
Number 12?
Yeah.
Okay. So you have to deal with that. You're on both ends of the scale, different programming initiatives, programming problems. So that, and then ultimately later on, before she pretty much kind of retired, she was a GM, managing director of a jazz station, which was a non-profit, limited amount of commercials, and then right through COVID. And it started with the thing was almost broke to begin with. So, and she managed to navigate that radio station with higher ratings, and nobody laid off during COVID, which was like a Herculean feat. That's Lori Russell.
Wow, what a great introduction. Yeah. Okay. I kind of did do a little bit in there.
Yeah, no, you've done a ton from... So when did you actually start? In 80?
Yeah, I moved to Toronto in 84 and was on the ad agency side for a while, and then I saw how much fun the radio people were having, and I went over and started selling for a national rep firm. You and I kind of got our footing when we were working on the relaunch of CKFM to Mix, which is now Virgin Radio.
Yeah.
35 years, 36 years?
Yeah, long time. So a lot of experience, a lot of history, a lot of seeing pretty much everything that you'd ever want to see. So our conversation that we were having was, we were just talking about radio, and we were talking about the course, and it's for PDs. And again, I thought it would be kind of cool to let you into the mind, and we'll just let it rip and talk about how somebody from the sales side, because I keep giving you a GM from the programming side, and I'm trying to teach you programming in the course. She's going to give you some insight into the salesperson's thinking who has become a general manager, and it is definitely a bit different. Although, as many of the lessons that I kind of went through with you, it's getting closer and closer and closer and closer. So let's start with this. You start out as a rep, national rep, and you come all the way to becoming a general manager. Where did you start to pick up programming type stuff along the way? What helped you? So I'm thinking of a PD, if they want to help a sales manager or a GM understand their problems, where'd you start picking up programming along the way? Because obviously you know a pretty fair amount about programming now.
Yeah, I would say that, you and I talk about the good old days. So, in the 80s and the 90s, in where I was working at the time, there was a division between programming and sales.
Right.
And at that point, there were three major media platforms. It was radio, TV, and print. So we didn't have to deal with a new world of a bunch of multimedia platforms and the opportunity for consumers to be fed messages to the degree that they are now. So in the early days, I would say understanding that programming and sales, we had this kind of a relationship because the programmers, and still today, are very true to brand and create a vision of what that radio station should sound like. And from that, what kind of advertisers they want to have on air. And from that as well, the evolution of, well, what else can we do, knowing that the revenue stream from sales is what fuels the opportunity for programming departments to continue to grow, to have assets, to have vehicles, to have street teams, to have all of those things that create extra touch points in the community. Probably during the middle of my career, when I had the opportunity to really be engaged in relaunching stations. And when we relaunched Easy Rock
we
to
did a bunch
Boom
of those.
97.3, when we launched Mix 99 to Virgin Radio, it was really an effort to understand that the two shall meet. And there, conversations ensued about, you're out in the marketplace, you're selling this radio station, you're leading a team that is communicating with advertisers. So what can you sell? What kind of format can we sell? In all of those situations, we had to define what our USP was. What set us apart from every other radio station. So from that, I learned and started to develop an appreciation for what those programming challenges were.
You started to see an open window into their world. And
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I was introduced to a sophisticated level of research of what Music Master and what the music feeds did, how they created a station based on, did we want to be a gold-based station? At one point, we launched a gold station. I went through a lot of PDs and morning shows throughout my tenure because we looked at how we could redefine the station to fill a gap that was in the market. For me to really understand that those were the dynamics of the PD, it helped me to understand that from the sales perspective, we needed to help to find those clients that were going to afford us the opportunity to provide, a three-point strategy, an on-site, an on-air, and later an online, and how we could own that listener and engaging them in a world outside of the radio station.
Here's a question. I mean, just kind of tweak me as you're talking. You're along the way, getting a pretty intense, reasonable, wide opening into the world of a PD. How many of those PDs actually took the initiative or whatever, wanted to get an insight into what the sales were doing?
I think it was a slow evolution. I think all of the departments had an ownership and a territorialism about what we were doing that spun that cog in the wheel to keep the radio station moving. And the minute that we started to get smart and engage our department heads in sitting down and having a discussion and building out strategic plans that said, okay, what's our vision? What do we want? Who do we want to be? And define ourselves against other competitive stations in the market. What makes us unique? What do we need to do to capitalize on money? And when the program directors started to understand, when we were building strategy, whether it was the salesperson saying, here's what my challenges are, and the PD understanding, wow, I had no idea what the challenge of a sales rep is in dealing with marketers who can change their mind in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
And you're looking at a substantial order that you need to close because you know that once that comes in, the programming department now have the opportunity to spend money to build their strategy, whether it's a street team, whether it's building an ad campaign, that they can't spend money that the station isn't bringing in. And it's all about the power of communication.
You're looking for a PD. Say I come to you to a job. Hey, I want to apply for your PD's job because there's an opening. You don't know me from Adam. What are you looking for in me? What general traits?
Loaded question. Loaded question.
Well, otherwise this is not going to be
Wow.
interesting. This is going to be a boring
Yeah.
video. You know,
No, that's
pretty
a great question.
Pretty much have to go to take the shot.
That's a great question. And I would say in hiring for any position that I have over the years, I mean, number one is passion. You know, in certain departments, you know, you hire passion and trained skill was always a bit of a motto for me because
That's a cool line. Hire passion, train skill. Cool.
yeah, and it worked.
that.
It worked. It worked
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
A lot of times, sometimes it didn't. But I would say that, you know, in looking for a PD, knowing that the PD isn't an island unto himself or herself, that they have a team that they're working with. So, you know, how do they work to develop a team that they show they can deliver strong leadership qualities, that somebody who's in there is going to want to drink that PD's Kool-Aid and is going to want to do everything that they possibly can to hear what they have to say, to be able to plant a vision, to be able to give those guiding tools that the team knows what it is that they have to do. I learned late in my career when I went to a great leadership training that I thought that as a GM, an early GM, that I thought I had to know everything about everything, that I needed to know all of the nuances of programming, that I had to know all of the nuances of finance because I was in charge with expense management and expense containment. But you hire to your weakness.
For sure, absolutely.
So I've worked with some wonderful operations managers over the years and some wonderful PDs who could defend their position based on what are you bringing to the table, that you have a certain amount of gut, but you also have a certain amount of fact-based knowledge. Can you communicate well? I love coming to work because I have a PD who is open, who listens, who I can talk to, who I can throw ideas to, who can sit back and create an opportunity for all people under their department to feel comfortable and confident in brainstorming.
Probably a hard question. I'm not even sure how I would actually answer this, but I'm going to ask you anyway. You have a PD. You have a PD who has a vision but doesn't share it real well. But at the same time, but actually gets results versus the other way around. What would run through your mind just to put you at ease? I'm not quite sure how I would handle that. I kind of might be looking at the results and going, we're pulling big ratings. I don't know if I just kind of let the person alone, or it's like at some point, like, hey, you need to let these people know how we got there, or you know what I mean? Because sometimes results are everything. Sometimes, you know what I mean? But other times you can't get there without the vision. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and you know, I've worked for some really dominant stations in the market where I've seen it one too many times, that PD who says, well, if it ain't broke, we don't need to fix it. If you're not keeping up and constantly thinking about how you can stay current or thinking a few steps ahead on what you can be doing to protect your current position or change it and be able to pivot, then that's not positive thinking.
Mm-hmm. From a general manager's point of view, if you walk out the door, the people that worked for you, they can't kind of keep it going because they're not quite sure what you did. You know, I mean, because that's important too. And also probably for your career, if there's a position above you, or maybe you can they'll plunk you out and make you a GM, you have to have basically train somebody else underneath you to step in. And that would be easier if everybody knows how to, everybody's on the same page. Everybody's, on the same train. There was somebody, I saw something it was some management guru, and it was, and basically it was, talking about teams. It's like, picture a train going from one city to another, and somebody gets on the wrong train. You got to get the person off the train, because that person can't be running up the aisles going, we're going the wrong way, turn the train around. Mm-hmm. Everybody's got to be sitting in the seat going forward the same way. I just thought it was a kind of a cool analogy. It's like, yeah.
I will say that throughout all of my years, and particularly in my role as a GM, the PD has a real tough job because everybody is looking to that PD to bring it on because sales feels the pressure. That PD wants to make sure that they are in a room filled with people and have a GM that has their back. And that
For sure.
you know, if you're predisposed as a PD to be that lone wolf, then it's really difficult to have people in your camp. If you're not walking the halls and you're talking to people about what their day looks like, and you want to put forth a major change and you want to present that as an opportunity, people can help to make a calculated decision that has your back. And if it doesn't work, then we're all in this together.
I know as when you were my sales manager and you were running sales and stuff like that, you had a lot of criteria or points that the salespeople had to do, like you need to do this, and you were judging them by, judging how well they were, or hey, you're good on these 7, these 3 are kind of weak. So I'm going to try to help you get better at these 3, so you're all 10 are kicking or 8 or whatever they were. Did you do that with your PDs too? Did you have some sort of and maybe it's just in your own mind of criteria that you're looking at for the PDs that okay, if they're doing a good job, they probably should be doing this?
That again is a really good question because of course PDs think, ratings to ratings. And what happens in between those ratings is obviously critical as the ratings day itself. But, I've worked with several very closely who would always be thinking about, okay, how can we change up our imaging? What can we be working with that is a place that we need to be?
When you say changing, you mean freshening?
Freshening the imaging,
okay.
Or if we had some local events that were going on in the city and we said, this is right up our alley in terms of brand friendliness. How can we work with this? How can we get on board? How can we be the presenting station? And that involved a conversation with sales. Okay, so we don't want to just have the banner. We don't want to just have our call letters. What else can we be doing to fully own this? In the absence of having the tools and the marketing capacities of the big 3, what could we be doing from a grassroots perspective that gave us impressions out in the marketplace? So I worked with some really strong PDs that were always thinking in years when we didn't have a budget to do full-on research. What could we be doing with our own loyal listenership that was going to give us some understandings and some teachings that we could look to implement into the station? What are some of the other stations doing that have seen some growth in ratings? What is their music palette that's different than ours? So I always was blessed with, in my GM days, with somebody that was coming to me with, hey, what do you think about this?
With ideas, yeah.
And that was a weekly, we had a weekly session with all of our department heads that it was a bitch session, it was a rah-rah session. If the sales team had a really good week, the programming guys were all like, shortly after that, somebody would come into my office and say, okay, that really cool idea that I talked about last week? We need $7,000 to do whatever. So there was...
And you're going, I don't have the budget.
And we're saying, hey, if you can find a way to monetize this, right. And, at the time I had corporate to report to, but it was do your research and know that if I have to back this, then I'm going to you for the fact, and I got your back, but you got to have mine because I've got to now sell this up if it's something that deviates from the master plan.
Let me switch gears a little bit and go into something that is, it definitely entails programming, but it really has nothing to do about programming the radio station. But now it's it's pretty prevalent. What do you do where you have one of the jocks? It's got their own Facebook page, which everybody in the world has a Facebook page, or pages, or Twitter, or whatever, and they portray something on their own social media that is 100% the opposite of where the station is, but yeah, they're a jock on the radio station. They represent the radio station out at events, where they would never say what they're saying, and that type of stuff. And on the air, they wouldn't get into whatever they're getting in. But on their own social media, they're off in some other world, and it's like, what are you doing? You're like, yeah. How do you?
I'll preface this by saying,
Don't give me any names.
that was always a very controversial issue, because people, yes, freedom of speech, and people have opinion, but we had to implement some who got it and some who thought it was a really rigid, unfair policy guideline around latitude in social media. But we made it very clear that you, as an announcer, have this voice and this following because we gave you a microphone.
Yeah, I think that gets lost in there along the way, where you see a lot of jocks. Let me take it out of social media for a second, and I'll bring it back to social media. I've seen an enormous amount of jocks who they're on a radio station and they're riding the radio station, and they have really good numbers. They have really good ratings, and they sound good, and it's cool, and all that stuff. But they think it's them more than it actually is, and that they're more important than it actually is. And they'll leave and go to another station, and no audience moves with them. Nothing. Nobody leaves. The next person comes in, nobody knows the new jock, and the audience stays the same because it's the station pulling, it's not the person. And, I think a lot of times on social media, they go, well, I'm a somebody, I can do this on social media. And it's like, what are you doing? And all of that.
I would say that, for sure, off the top of my mind, this has happened. I've seen this happen 3 times in my career and in my tenure as a GM.
Probably within the last 5-6 years.
Absolutely.
Yeah, obviously, the more social media, the more you're going to run into it.
Where we, again, going back to that communication element, the best thing that a PD can push their GM to do is share the vision of the station. And what that means is, what are the values that we want to make sure that we're understood for, and that our hosts use as a Bible when they speak on air.
For everything.
For everything.
For everything that they do, yeah.
When you say we are not a political-based radio station, we don't go into some of those delicate areas, and we don't fight on Facebook and take on the radicals who may have another opinion about a statement that you've made. It puts the station in a very vulnerable position. And some would say, well, this is on my own personal post. But a personal post, it's different. I wouldn't even do it, and I'm not on air. But for announcers to understand that some of that following that like you as a result of the great presentation that you do on air are going to find you on your personal page. And sorry, but you need to be acknowledging what we've put forth in values.
Yeah, when I was managing a news talk station, actually 2 of them. I did 2 of them, one in Montreal and one in Toronto. It becomes really, really clear, super evident, and probably part of this will go for morning shows if they sort of get into areas that that are dicey. You can be 100% sure that if you say something that's really pushing the boundaries, and I don't mean about funny, but I mean about like politics, and particularly politics, you're going to immediately have half your audience not like you. And if you step back and you go, why would you do that? It's kind of like if I'm driving the van and there's call letters on the side, I'm not cutting people off. I'm not screaming at them at a stoplight. I'm not doing road rage, and I'm not giving them the finger. No, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Along the way. And you're just trying to be, kind, gentle, nice, the perfect driver type thing, because the call letters are on the van. If it's my own car, I might do all of those things, possibly, because there's no call letters. But kind of social media is the same way. If you're a jockey, your call letters are, they move with you. And all of that type of stuff.
You understand too that you want, there's certain formats that need
sure.
to take chances and risks because that's what they do. They're journalists.
I know. I certainly, not being in day-to-day radio now, I hear things differently. The critical PD type thing, a lot of stuff blows right by me right now, and I'll notice it after the fact, like the little 5-second inserts. I must have fought tooth and nail for years. No, we're not doing that. We're not doing that. They'll suck. They're going to push audience away. They'll just think it's another commercial. Meanwhile, we're down in Florida. I'm riding along, and one goes on some station, blows by me. It sort of registers like 15 minutes later that I heard one of those things. I didn't even notice it. Didn't bother me at all. It's like 180 on the thinking about it. To go back now to what you were just talking about. Do you ever think that there's times where something happens and it's a news story, and even, let's just say, even if it's a news talk station and you have a $250,000 client and the news department is wringing them out to dry, when in reality it would be nice if they kind of thought about it, and not like they didn't do the story, but they don't necessarily need to wade into it depending on what it is. In other words, if somebody does something incredibly heinous or really bad, fine, fill your boots, weigh into it, and really, because the company deserves it. But then there's other things where it's like, yeah, it's not that big of a deal. Sure, do the news like maybe every other station, but you don't have to kind of beat the crap out of the client for sometimes it would seem to me for no reason.
That is a great example because I lived through
one of those.
Many of them.
Yeah.
But one in particular.
Don't say the client.
No, I will not say the client. This happened to be an airline that whose flight was grounded for an exorbitant amount of time, and there was a lot of backlash from some of the passengers that were there. And anyway, without getting into a whole lot of detail, it was exactly that scenario. This particular airline happened to be a very, very prominent client. I had a chance to work with this particular PD for a number of years, and you and I both know who this person is. And again, that passion, I saw passion and protectiveness of the brand and territorialism, but I started to get it and say, wow, I can't suck and blow. If I've bought into what my GM, and we've all had a chance to sit around the table and agree on what our mission was going forward, I had to agree to him that when he said, get the client on the air. We'll play both sides of the story because that's what we do.
That's fair.
And I said, this client wasn't being very cooperative and didn't want to make a statement.
Did they want to go on the air? They
didn't want to go on the air.
They probably thought they were going to get ripped apart.
Rolled the dice and said, this is who we are, this is what we do. We looked around a boardroom table and we all agreed. And did we throw caution to the wind knowing that we might lose a big account? Yes, we did. But by being firm and, again, the quality of the person who's delivering the message, I was able to say, if you were in my position and you had all this pressure to do what you were doing in grounding that flight for as long as you did, and you knew that you'd get backlash, but you still did it anyway for your own reasons.
You're saying this to the client?
I said this to the client.
Wow, nice.
And the client was able to, I said, that is exactly what we're doing. It's a credibility issue for us, and it dishonors what we as a department, including our extended people, news people, street people who are doing news, we would lose the respect of our people. Something we can't afford to do.
And they said...
And we were actually able to save the client.
Wow, that's pretty heavy duty.
I worked with some phenomenal PDs over the years who allowed me to ask a bunch of questions in the hallways and, tell me about this, and, when you're doing this, and, this song's a power and why. And I used to sit in the music meetings because I was just fascinated with how they categorized music, and did it fit, did it not? And I would challenge in a way that I said, look, I'm the neophyte here.
Yeah, explain it to me.
But explain it to me.
Yeah.
And I was fascinated about it. Some of it I would say, okay, I got some of it, but some of it's right here, and I'm okay with that. So we'll catch up on it later, and being
Right.
able to say, you know,
Yeah.
that's why we pay you what we pay you, because you're the expert in that field.
Right, and there's stuff that you will never know because
Yeah.
you don't have 20 years of
Don't
doing
time.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't have the 10,000 hour thing. All right, so we're gonna call it a day here because we're melting out here, and man, I am sweating like unbelievably in here. I have no idea what the next lesson is going to be, but we'll figure it out before next week. So hope you enjoyed this. Hope you got something out of it. As always, do the usual YouTube stuff and the algorithms. Make sure you hit the like. That's a big deal. Subscribe if you haven't already. And we will see you next week on Monday, 12:01 a.m. Till then, see ya.